Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. Glad to have you. Today, we're going to be talking about cryptography posture management for quantum readiness. My name is Philip LaFrance. I have the pleasure of being the moderator for today's festivities, and I am joined by my colleagues, Rob, who is our Director of Product Strategy, and Vijay, our lead on go-to-market. Just a couple things before we get into it. So we're going to have our presentations today, and then immediately after that, we're going to be moving into our live Q&A. So if you have any questions during the presentations, feel free to submit those in chat, and we'll do our best to address those shortly. So with the administrivia out of the way, I think we should jump right into the material. So before we start talking about this, I would like to just take a second to maybe set the table and maybe give some context to our conversation today. When we're talking about quantum readiness, really fundamentally at the end of the day, at a high level, there are two real big decisions that all enterprises are going to have to make. And one of those is they need to decide, when do we act? And then they're going to have to decide, how do we act? So on the when side, it's questions like, how much time do we need to take the actions we need to take? And how much time do we have to safely do that in a nice risk management way? And as for how to act, well, now we got to answer questions like, what are the actual steps we need to take, and what are the resources required to do so? And today we're going to be talking about why cryptography posture management, why cryptographic inventories are going to be critical for answering these questions for enterprises. So with those introductions out of the way, why don't I hand it over to you good gentlemen and take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Philip, for the introductions. The key point that you mentioned in terms of cryptographic posture management and why inventory, it's critical to understand what the vulnerabilities today are and what does it mean in terms of the impact that they can have on your business, and what does the data drive the next set of steps. So we look at it from, I wouldn't say a 10-step process, but more of a flow of things that happen typically in any product or enterprise initiative. So the first step is data. That's where the understanding happens. And based on that understanding, how can you assess or try to get a grasp on your urgency? The urgency would determine a lot of the prioritization of the important servers and workloads that you might have. And then you're going to define, say, this is my program charter. This is my outcomes that I need. This is how I can mitigate these business risks. Based on that, you can define some alternatives, which we would dive deeper into in terms of mitigate, migrate, etc. So, but those steps require which teams are involved, which resources do we need, how much of time do we need, are we going to engage with other vendors? So a lot of decisions have to be made to execute those actions. And then subsequently, you measure, validate the outcomes so that you can get into that crypto posture state to be quantum ready. The key thing is all of these might seem overwhelming to start with, and our focus for today is to break it down as much as we can so that they become incremental steps that can be adopted and how you can drive towards a quantum readiness.
Yeah, thanks, Vijay. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, all good problem solving starts with breaking the problem down into manageable pieces. And I think one of the things we're going to discover today, maybe there's a pun there, is that many of these steps are pretty closely aligned to things that organizations are probably or should already be doing. So it might look overwhelming from the 1,000-foot view, but when you get down to it, I think this is going to be more approachable than some people think. So why don't we move on and sort of look at some of these steps in a little bit more detail.
Mm-hmm. So the first thing you're going to have to do is understand the vulnerabilities and their impact. So that itself is going to involve a couple of steps, things that you want to do. So you have to identify which assets, like servers, services, microservices, and network segments that they sit on to look for these vulnerabilities. Then you're going to have to understand things like the cryptographic algorithms they use, like the key exchanges, the key sizes, the algorithms, and the protocols. Protocols are important. You might have a fantastic brand new MLDSA certificate, but you're still trying to use TLS 1.0, which makes no sense. Then you're going to have to classify those vulnerabilities into different buckets, such as quantum safe or strong, with the caveat there being that it is quantum broken, things that you should be cautious about, and things that are outright broken or unacceptable today. And then you need to determine the business impact based on the associated risks, units, and geographies. Geographies are important. Certain governments in different regions might require different algorithms or allow different algorithms, whereas a different geography in your enterprise might require stronger.
Maybe a quick little halfway devil's advocate question for you, Rob.
Yeah.
So we're talking about quantum safe, strong, caution, broken, unacceptable. If we're talking about quantum readiness, why not just quantum vulnerable, not quantum vulnerable?
Mm-hmm. That really is coming down to understanding the vulnerabilities. If you have a really weak key or a key exchange or a hash, you might be vulnerable today without a quantum computer being involved. You might be vulnerable to attacks that have existed for 10, 15 years. And because you haven't tracked it well in your organization, you're vulnerable right now.
Right. So maybe what you're saying is that there is value to doing this sort of irrespective of quantum computing.
Totally. Yeah, totally agree.
Cool. Okay. I like that.
That dovetails right into this topic where urgency, it's not about just what protocols you might have. Do you have the not vulnerable, very vulnerable? There are shades of vulnerabilities in there. And as Rob pointed out, you might have the strong hashing, strong algorithms, but you might have a very weak protocol, which means you're not safe at all. So that's where the detailed data is very helpful. One, to assess the urgency. And what does it mean? So you have all these cryptography related details sitting here that you've gathered. Then you say, here is my servers or workloads that are having the most sensitive employee data. Or these are my servers that are housing all of my patients' data in the United States or in United States and Canada. Or this is all my revenue data for the entire world. There goes the importance of what data resides in each one of these servers. So as much as cryptography is the foundation for your cybersecurity, you have to map the value and the sensitivity of your data with that to be able to say, oh, here is my importance of data and servers, along with how vulnerable the data can be with cryptography. And we start to define the urgency.
Mm-hmm.
And along that way, when you're starting to define that urgency, you have to say, my business risk can go from 99% at risk to 32% at risk. And there's a path to that ability to risk mitigate yourself. That's why this step is paramount to be able to understand the urgency and drive the next step.
Right. So it's not just enough to know and assess the cryptography being used. You also got to know the importance to you of the asset that it protects. And I guess sort of like what we were saying a few moments ago, many organizations already have data classification schemes. So if you have some database that has some very sensitive information, hopefully you already have that labeled and you understand at least somewhat the value there. So that's one of those things that already exists that can sort of make this a lighter lift at the end of the day for some of these organizations.
Absolutely.
The next thing you should consider is prioritizing the actions that you, your team, your enterprise is going to take. So for those actions, you will need to assign a priority based on the risk due to something like the cryptography or the protocol and the importance of the data which might be getting exposed. And you need to determine the relative priority so that not everything becomes a top or a low priority. So you might have a press release website. That press release website you publish content to it, you want it to be as accessible as possible. You might have a shareholder briefing report site where the same things get published. You want everyone to be able to read that. Nothing on there is confidential. This is information you're sharing with the world. That is not very risky, or from a security point of view, very important, because it's already out there in the world.
Yeah, that's I really like these sort of practical, real world grounded approaches. There's some people who I affiliate with strongly, and I agree, everything should be as secure as can be made secure. But, the reality is you have some web pages, accessibility needs to be more a priority than security, because you're not sending any private data, stuff like that. So yeah, there's some trade-offs to consider there. And of course you can't action on everything you have at once. That's just not going to happen. So there does need to be some sort of priority order assigned here. And what I'm getting is we want to base that on the value, the risk, the impact, and all those nice fun things. Okay. Moving along.
Perfect. So, to your point, Philip, you kind of touched upon a very critical point. There's finite budget, there is finite resources, there's finite time. So, also along those lines, you have to determine what is the best action. You might want to migrate everything to a modern technology, say in the cloud, that might be not only quantum safe, but might be more fitting for the future technologies, that could have some AI elements in it. But again, finite resources and finite budget. So you need to be grounded with that. So that's where we kind of fork it into two approaches. One is mitigation. Mitigation basically goes into how can I address some of the configurations that are there. So you can upgrade your algorithms. To Rob's previous point, you might have upgraded to MLDSA or MLChem, but you might still have a TLS 1.0 protocol. Then your focus is to mitigate the protocol. So based on the data, you define what your mitigation strategy is, and that might not be in the cloud future-proofed in terms of technology, but it is good as a secure application for the next 5 to 10 years. That can happen with your existing resources. So mitigation happens for scenarios where you're able to live with that technology and be quantum ready, and at the same time be secure for today's cryptographic posture. Then there are some legacy. You might have some very old applications that were homegrown 20, 30 years back. And those might not be as quantum safe, but also they might not be the best ones to continue to invest time on. So those cases you have to assess, are you going to be working with an external vendor, or do you have those internal resources that are doing that application? How can you migrate them? And if you're going to take the step of migrating, you might say, I might go to a newer technology or newer technology plus where it resides, like the cloud. And what are the cost implications to that? So all of those components kind of get into that strategizing of what your outcomes can be. Mitigate, migrate, and what are the detailed steps. And that will define some of the next steps too.
Yeah, I actually like that quite a bit, right? So forgive me if this is my interpretation. Feel free to correct me. So mitigations are sort of like the quick wins. So a configuration change, a software update, something like that. It'll get you quantum ready, quantum safe, but maybe years down the road, it's not where you want to end up, right? Whereas if you're migrating, maybe it's retiring an asset, rebuilding it using a different technology, migrating to the cloud. That is something that's maybe more in line with like your long-term vision. So, my takeaway is this is just another reason why people should probably start now on this sort of thing to kind of do that planning. Do you want to do something that's quick and easy today that might give you some kind of technical debt or cost debt in the future? Or do you want to, maybe put a little bit more effort, do something a little bit bigger, but it's going to be better for you kind of down the road at the end of the day? Is that kind of about right?
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. I don't know. I just think this stuff is exciting. Hey, let's move on to number 5.
Yeah. The next thing you want to do is detail the alternatives. So you might want to evaluate if it's better to take a hybrid approach to encryption that will be safe today and quantum safe into the future, or determine if it's better to retire Asset 48 and build a cloud application with similar features. Some customers we've spoken to, they've said that they have stuff running on really old versions of Linux, and most of the people that maintain it have retired. That is an example of when you're going to have to define the alternatives. It's not going to be an easy mitigation. That sounds like a migration, addressing Vijay's previous point.
Yeah. Yeah. People want drop-in solutions as much as possible because it's the lowest friction, right? And, it's as secure. So we would love to just say, just use MLDSA, just use MLChem if you can, but that might not be your reality. And, there's a lot of people out there for very good reason who strongly argue for the use of hybrids for now and not even using just like the pure algorithms. And that's certainly come up in some of our conversations. So, yeah, you got to look at what the options are for you. And, maybe not every organization is going to have that knowledge just at their fingertips. They might not have the internal experts. And that's one of the reasons that this is very much a global effort, right? Why you should talk to experts, you should talk to people who are involved with this, maybe the standards bodies, forums, and things like that, to kind of get a better idea of what else can you do besides just kind of hope you have a new software library to drop in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, based on all the alternatives that we have assessed, based on the outcomes that we have defined, now comes the reality, which is the finite budget, finite resourcing, finite time. So, who do we have? And for the specific alternatives, are we going to go to vendors to get some estimates on what it takes to either mitigate or migrate? Or do we have internal resources that are working on 5 other projects? How can we allocate them? And how do we build kind of a plan together so that we can understand from a crypto posture management and a quantum readiness perspective, this program would have these set of assets with these set of resources, and so much of time would be involved over the next 8 weeks or 12 weeks. So it brings in the components to build a plan together that we can start to execute.
Yeah. And again, this is a good argument for starting now, because I can imagine that once you start doing these sort of cost resource estimates, that surprises and quirks can come up, so vendors, right? How critical is it to talk to your vendors right now? Are you just assuming that they're going to give you a quantum safe software update at some point? Do you know that for sure? Do you know when it's coming? Do you know if that update is going to be interoperable with your current systems? And so we were saying at the top of this that there's probably things organizations are doing right now that they can leverage and integrate here. And vendor management, I think, is probably one of those things. Do you have a list of the vendors that you need to talk to? And I can only imagine, too, that you might have to go back and reevaluate, maybe select a different, maybe an intermediary solution or something, just kind of based on what's required, what you have available right now, and things like that. It doesn't need to be complicated, but you should probably get on this early just to identify those potential blockers.
And of course, once you've done quite a bit of planning, you have to execute the actions. So you're going to take the required mitigation or migration actions, and they could be super easy. Like, is it just updating configuration? Is it a little bit more complex, a little bit more engineering, where it's changing a crypto library? Is it extremely engineering heavy, where you might have to rewrite one of your legacy applications? Or is it as simple as moving an existing application to a quantum ready cloud? But once you start executing those actions, it is critical that you also track the progress of your mitigations and migrations and report on them. So evolution like this is going to be a moving target. As you start executing these actions, other applications might even come online. So if you're not reporting, if you're not tracking the progress, you won't know when you're halfway finished.
Yeah, again, I strongly agree. I mean, this is just good change management practice, right? If you're trying to make all of these changes, well, track them. I've done this, I haven't done this, because these readiness plans are going to be living creatures. I mean, things are just going to change when reality happens. So you got to track, you got to monitor, and maybe go back and adjust on the fly.
So that goes back into the why we were naming this crypto posture. The posture is something that's a living thing. So it continuously changes either based on people, technologies, and processes that are going around them. So the posture last week might have been you are 15% healthy. Today it might be 45% healthy. To be able to measure those and validate that you're meeting your outcomes that you defined early on is super important, right? And it's very helpful for you to report it out to your C-levels, your board meetings. It gives them a sense of not only progress, but it gives them a sense of where we are heading and how we are doing in terms of the overall quantum readiness strategy. And for example, for a CFO who would have agreed on doing this initiative, it's very, very important, paramount to be able to understand that measurability is there. And based on that, how are we validating it? So that's where the posture becomes very important. And think of it as you create snapshots. You would have seen on your phone in terms of memories from 2022. It's basically a snapshot created in time at that time. And how are you today in terms of your own peers, your own teams, or your own family? So it gives a sense of where you're going in the journey. And for you to be able to say, oh, I've done these things, I've improved the posture from here to here. So that progress is very important to not only measure and track, but also to be able to share and celebrate within your enterprise so that you're trending in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if I know anything about executives, it's that they like KPIs. So being able to actually track, monitor, last month our risk was this month it's like this. That just screams value to me, and so much of this needs board level buy-in, board level support, and being able to justify and say we've made improvements and here's how we measure it this much. That just strengthens your case, and I think it just all around makes this whole process better for everyone involved.
The next thing we need to do is to continue to monitor and validate our progress. So you would do things like comparing the snapshots of your crypto posture and how it looks in terms of business risks and quantum readiness. And you'll continue to monitor and validate and report your quantum readiness. So you would be discovering progress, hopefully. Worst case, though, you might be discovering regressions. If you just assume something has been made quantum ready or other cryptographic risks have been addressed, that might not be the case. You fully need to continue to monitor and validate your progress.
Yeah, and I think once we get to the Q&A, I've got some questions sort of along the lines of assumptions people might make about how they become quantum readiness or quantum ready, and maybe ways that we can address that. But yeah, again, really what I'm getting from this is this isn't a one and done thing, right? Quantum readiness doesn't just happen once. Crypto posture management doesn't just happen once. This really should be an ongoing thing, right? So again, kind of incorporate it into how you generally manage your cybersecurity posture right now. So something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're going to shift gears into slightly different stuff. So I think this is a really nice framework. I'm really glad we went over this. I think there's a lot of really, really nice things in here, but let's look at crypto posture management a little bit more broadly right now.
So, to a lot of the things we talked about, if we look at today's picture, this picture basically shows an enterprise. You have all the clients, whether it's your employees accessing from internal environments, internal network, or external from their home to a remote location, or it might be third party applications from the cloud coming into your network to access certain data. It could be partners from data centers coming in. But what we see today is there is a big silos in terms of how crypto posture is being managed. And why do I say that? The number one is network security, as you can see on top. There is sort of verticalization of network security, and the posture might be good or bad in that area. Then you go to the cloud, which is number two. And whether you're on Azure or you're on Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud, you might have a lot of them quantum ready, or you might have 50% quantum ready and 50% not in terms of protocols and key strings and so on. And then you have your own data centers, which we have seen with a lot of customers that they are less prepared than the cloud environments. But what goes on is there is nothing that can map a crypto posture today between your network view and your cloud view and your data center view. And when I say the cloud and data center, they are not only infrastructure that you're hosting or being hosted on, it's also the applications that are hosted on there. They are housing your most sensitive data. And here comes back to all the application configurations you have. Here are Linux libraries that might not have the best of the protocols, and I'm taking Linux as an example. It could be Windows, Microsoft environments too. And then your application source code, which we have talked time and again. There could be a lot of legacy applications in your data centers or even in servers sitting under your desk. So there is all of these environments that are hosting your applications and your sensitive data, and they're all siloed. And for you to be able to say, I'm crypto posture 15% business risk today, as opposed to 80% business risk, is really impossible to understand. And that is one of the challenges that is in front of a lot of the enterprises where, how do I get started? When do I need to get started? As Philip mentioned in the first part of the session. So the silos is creating more difficulty to be able to understand and get that visibility. And that's why we call this as a lack of context. So you might have complete lack of context, or you might have 50% lack of context. It depends on your enterprise. But that is what this whole journey to quantum readiness helps you understand.
Yeah, we obviously can't see the audience right now, but I imagine as soon as they see the word silos, there's a lot of people nodding along pretty fiercely. I mean, it's such a well-known problem in organizations, is this problem of siloing. And, we're talking about cryptography, which is super horizontal. It lives everywhere. So we kind of need to glue together these silos in some way to kind of get that crypto visibility. And, how many enterprises are there that are 100 years old who are doing some kind of IT modernization? So this has been moved to the cloud, this has maybe been updated, that hasn't been touched in 15 years since Joe retired. I mean, so you have all these different technologies, all these different, levels of maturity and migration. I mean, there's a lot of different components that you might need to go get that visibility into. So yeah, I think these silos are a very real problem, and gluing them together, getting that crypto posture visibility in there, I think is going to be absolutely crucial for long-term quantum readiness planning for sure. I like this slide.
Well, the next thing we're going to look at is driving with your enablers. So there are probably already things inside your organization, inside your enterprise, that are enabling you to achieve these goals. So part one, use the data that you already have from your networks, applications, your CMDB, your endpoints. You might already have a lot more information than you know you have, and you could be getting started already. Next thing to consider is follow current change management processes for quantum readiness actions. So an example would to be not to be requesting brand new RSA certificates if you knew all of your clients were already quantum ready. Those are things that would be current. You should manage your quantum risk like cyber risk. Use the existing preferred risk methodologies. So if you already know that you're responding to CVEs regularly, then you already know about managing cyber risk. Quantum risk is not being managed through things like CVEs, but it's there and it's coming, and you should be managing it like it is. Step 4, use your PMO to manage and coordinate with vendors and projects. These resources exist to manage things, to manage stuff that's happening around you and inside your enterprise. So if there are projects that are helping you approach quantum readiness, those people should be managing them. If there are vendors that you are waiting to deliver the capability for quantum readiness, then you really want to be managing that as well. And step 5, you should be reporting this out just like any other program to bring visibility. This quantum vulnerability isn't something you should be hiding. Your need to approach quantum readiness is something that you should be proud of, and you should be achieving it publicly. Not outside of the enterprise, but publicly internally.
Yeah, again, I agree very, very strongly with this. I mean, and this, again, goes back to what I was saying sort of off the top is leverage what you have. This doesn't need to be overwhelming. It just sometimes looks like that. Like you have data already, endpoints, CMDB on your network, maybe just bring it together, do an analysis. You already are doing change management. You're already doing vendor management. I mean, large enterprises, of course, are doing risk management. There's very sophisticated methodologies for this. So, we proposed one earlier about the value and the impact and the vulnerability level. But maybe you already have a system in place for this that you can just plop it into or adapt pretty easily. So, I think all of this stuff is just, what can we use that we already have that just makes this whole thing easier for us? And I think that's a really important question for organizations to ask themselves. It doesn't need to be super difficult. Mm-hmm. I think maybe we have a couple more slides here. Yeah, this is a very elegant looking slide. Vijay, you want to take this one?
Sure. So I think we want to bring it all together, where crypto posture management is what we are focused on. So the focus is for the reason that we might have weak communications today. Data breaches would be happening with ransomware, malware today. We got to spot those weak cryptography to be able to say, we've got to be secure. So how do you do it? You do it with cryptographic discovery. And then once you have that, you can see what is at risk. You can go to your servers sitting in your data center, servers sitting under your desk, bad idea, or servers and serverless options in the cloud, and see what are those workloads correlating to. Are they having the most important, highly sensitive data, and they're having weak protocols, outdated protocols, or weak cryptography with RSA-2K type of key strings? So once you map your infrastructure and your applications, you get the crypto visibility that you want, the risks associated with it. And the cryptographic risk, if you look at PCI DSS, if you look at NIST CSF framework, or a bunch of other compliance framework, cryptographic risk is anywhere from 10 to 25% of what correlates to business risk. So a lot of the compliance frameworks are being implemented so that you don't get into a situation of a risky reputation damage or brand damage or a legal consequence or a revenue loss. There can be any number of outcomes that can come out of it. So you want to correlate your cryptographic risk to the business risk so that that context by itself with the data, how do you contextualize it and how do you action it? The most contextual it can be in the high priority actions, you're going to move really fast in terms of your quantum readiness strategy or journey. So it's very key to be able to use the data to contextualize it, action it, report the crypto posture, and finally get into a quantum hygiene state where you can say, my quantum hygiene is 50% ready. My quantum hygiene 2 months from now is 89% ready. Eventually, we'll all get to the 4 nines and whatever else, 2 nines. So that is sort of the evolution that we go through with crypto posture management. And it is overwhelming to start with, but as we have talked to in the last hour or so, it's a sequence of steps that you can take, you can break it down, and you can achieve it.
Yeah, that was very well put, Vijay. Thank you. I think one of the things we maybe haven't explicitly said yet today is this doesn't have to be such a manual process. I mean, ideally, you want this to be as automated as possible. So that's the discovery and the inventory and doing at least the assessment of the vulnerabilities, your cryptographic risk, and then prioritization. And then I really like this remediation from workflows, right? So you already have, CMDBs, you already have ticketing systems, ticketing or ticket-based workflows. So can we just leverage those? Can we integrate into those to smoothly make this easier to, again, reach those nice KPIs? So I think this is a really nice slide, and I think it sums up what we've been talking about today really well. But with that, I think we are at the end of this part of the webinar. I think let's say a hearty thank you to everyone who's tuned in, and I think we should turn to the audience questions. I think there's going to be some interesting and exciting questions to answer. So thank you, everyone. Let's get to the Q&A. So we got a few questions that have rolled in, and we got a few minutes left still. So let's see how many of these we can get through. Why don't we start with the big one, which is coincidentally also a fun one. How do I get board level buy-in for quantum readiness? Terrifically important question. Vijay, you want to start on this one?
Sure. So the board level buy-in is always a tough one where you can take some mini steps. That's where a lot of what we talked about in the last 30 minutes in terms of doing an inventory, a small set of servers that you can take and do a discovery inventory. You can use that as a step to go back to say, board, here's the 100 servers we took, here's what we found, here's the report. Um, our business risk is so much. So we would need to do over these sensitive areas, and we need a budget of, say, 10K, 100K, whatever it may be, based on your enterprise. It's data driven budget request so that you can quantify what outcomes come from that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good answer. I mean, I would add that there's the tangible things and there's the intangible things. And you have all these really good intangible arguments. We have to do this. Cryptographically relevant quantum computers are coming. We need to be seen as a leader in security, someone who is taking cybersecurity seriously, but there's also benefits to doing that. But some of those things can be difficult to measure, and there's, a litany of other things you can add to that. But when you have something concrete that you can bring to the board and say, this is what we did. This is how we measurably reduced risk. This is this low friction activity that we did. Like we were talking about earlier, I think that really just strengthens your argument. Rob, anything you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I just think that no one wants to be the person on the board who said, "Don't worry about that. That crypto risk's never going to happen."
Yeah,
They don't want to be that person.
famous last words, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's abundantly fair. Here's a good question. Vijay, I think maybe I'll let you start with this one. What is an estimated timeline for developing an initial crypto inventory?
Depends on the size of the network and your infrastructure, but in an automated environment or in an automated approach, you should be able to get an inventory done within 2 to 4 weeks. It should not be as difficult. So it's a quick, as we said, start small. It could be 50, 100 servers so that you're able to build that inventory quickly so that you can go to your risk management team, to your security team, whichever team you're in, and to your board and management and take the next steps.
Yeah, and the caveat there is that's if you're using a nice automated tool. If you want to do this by hand, then, people are going to be growing very long beards by the time the initial inventory is done. And then, we can talk about the inaccuracies in it, errors, and, how things might change. But yeah, it really should take only a few weeks, maybe a little bit more, kind of depending on your scope. Um, Rob, anything you want to add on that one?
Yeah, but you've got to line up those ducks first. You've got to make sure that the people who would give you access or prevent access to specific systems, packet brokers, are in agreement. Once all of those procedural steps are taken, the automated steps can happen.
Yeah, that's good call. Thank you. Yeah, and there's prep work you have to do. Yeah, I like getting your ducks in a row. Very well put. Um, Maybe a similar question here. Should I wait until I have a complete enterprise-wide view of my crypto before I start getting quantum ready?
I'll start there. I'm going to say no. Don't wait. As as soon as you find out that you have a problem, you should fix it. If you discovered there was a tiny little leak in your boat, probably should start to patch it before you've discovered all the other leaks.
Yeah,
So working with as little information might not be giving you the full size, the full scope of migrating, mitigating everything that exists in your organization, but you have to start somewhere. You can't wait forever.
yeah. Vijay?
Absolutely. So we almost repeat this where the more time we wait, we are um, handicapping ourselves, both in terms of a budget cycle as well as visibility and how do you move towards this quantum readiness. So please do not wait.
Yeah, that's a good call to action. Don't wait. And we talk like this should be an iterative thing. It's going to be over time. There's going to be, rounds to it. But I think there's something to be said about the learning curve. Start small, figure it out, get that experience, and that gives you the confidence and the experience to go and expand out your scope and go full enterprise. Maybe one last question. Well, we got just a touch of time left. Another fun one, in my opinion. What are the difficulties or the dangers of trying to become quantum ready without having an inventory?
Missing. I think missing the goals, missing the most important systems. So if you believe you're quantum ready and you haven't got that inventory, you're not sure. You don't know if systems have been addressed. You don't know if systems have been resolved. You might have missed the most important capabilities and left yourself vulnerable and exposed for the worst possible ways.
I
Yeah,
would go the opposite, where missing the data.
Mhm.
What do you act on, right? If you don't have the data, it is tough to say, I want to go fix this set of servers or I want to go do these actions. Without the data, it's really difficult. And then you don't know what you have done. So we talked about snapshots being taken at different points. You want to have the complete visibility in how you're progressing. So without the data, it becomes really difficult.
yeah. Never mind the tracking and monitoring and reporting. I mean, maybe a short way to put it is if you go in blind, you're gonna make mistakes, and it's just gonna cost you more at the end of the day. So do that prep work, get that visibility. We are out of time. So Rob, Vijay, do you guys have any last things you'd like to say before we close out and give a hearty thank you to our attendees?
Oh, I would like to say thank you very much for being part of this webinar. We are going to be at Gartner next week. So if you want to stop by, we are at booth 1239 at Gartner. So looking forward to seeing some of you there. If not, if you have any questions, any additional things, reach out to us. Um, we can probably put up a quick email here. I'll type it out in the chat.
Sounds good. And Rob?
I just want to thank everyone for attending and thank you for your questions.
And for the purposes of being redundant, I will also say thank you very much for everyone who joined. This is a lot of fun. We're going to be doing these more in the future, so looking forward to seeing you then as well. So if we don't see you at Gardner, we will see you next time. Hope everyone has a great day. Cheers.